Today this is a Book Potato interview. Today I am with author Helen Mathews. Helen writes suspense novels. Helen, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you very much.
Fantastic. You are in the shop today with us. You're signing some books, you're selling some books, you're speaking to fans of yours?
Yes, that's right. No, I'm really grateful to Bookpotato for giving me this opportunity.
No problem, thank you.
I've been in for about just over an hour and it's been very successful. I've talked to quite a lot of people and your lovely customers seem very interested in talking about my books.
They're very, very interested. So, these are your two currently you have.
Yeah.
Which came first? And I suppose if you want to explain briefly for anyone who doesn't know about your books, how would you describe what they're about?
Okay. So my first published book is called After Leaving the Village, and I describe it as a suspense thriller. Before I started writing, I didn't realise how important it was to write in a genre. I thought I was just writing a book.
Sure.
But as I later learned from the publisher and from other experts, you have to have it in a genre so that people know if they're going to like it and whether they'll go towards it.
Sure.
So before I wrote this one, I'd written a few books, a few unpublished books, which were probably more based on my own experience and what I knew. But this one was a departure because I started to write about something I didn't know, and I had to research it very thoroughly. Because I do like to write sort of slightly darker material. And this book is about human trafficking and modern slavery. So just take a pause for a moment to think, why would I write something like that?
Yeah, very much.
So I'm really interested in the world that we live in, and you know, what are the big contemporary issues of our day. And I got involved with a charity that worked with the survivors of human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking for a new theme for a novel at that time, and it came to me that this would be an amazing thing to write about at the level of the character. So it's not like you know, multiple countries organised crime type thriller. It's very much about the experience of a protagonist, a woman who comes from a village in Albania. And I did go to Albania actually to research the story. And then her story interrelates and interweaves with that of a woman who's based in London. And eventually their paths meet in a rather surprising way.
Right.
So yes, it was very interesting to research.
Absolutely. No, it sounds it. I think a lot of people, I think, certainly if you're starting off on your journey as an author, perhaps don't always go into that level of sort of research or perhaps feel that they need to. So I think it's very refreshing. I think it's important that, as I said, you've thought about this, not just why it's a story and this might happen and it flows. You've actually gone and tried to base it on some truth and some pretty shocking situations.
Yes, I kind of wanted the reader to be able to walk in the character's shoes and experience perhaps the level of jeopardy that obviously she doesn't realise at first. Because one of the things that I've discovered about trafficking as I've learned more about it is often the person in real life or the character in my novel is groomed by somebody that they think is a friend, and it might be a relative, it might be an acquaintance.
Yeah.
And you know, people might say, why is your character so naive? But the whole point about trafficking is that until the trap has been sprung, nobody knows that there is a trap.
Yeah.
You know, they just believe that they have a normal relationship and they just don't see it coming.
Yeah.
And we've all been there, haven't we? We've all trusted people in the past.
Yeah.
Hopefully for us it's worked out well, but these days you just don't know.
But if you found yourself in a foreign country in a different language and everything else and you've got no money, then suddenly it's not quite as easy to walk away.
Totally, yeah. I mean, the way if I can just take that thought a bit further, the way I talk about that is, imagine you went to China for a job. So you got out at the airport and there was somebody there with your name on a card to meet you. You were expecting to be met by somebody, and this person takes you in their car and you suddenly realise they're driving you far away from Shanghai or Beijing. You find yourself very disorientated. They take your passport off you. You're in like a small village perhaps, and then maybe, I don't know, they lock you up somewhere. But even if they don't, you go out into that village, you're not going to be able to talk to anybody. First, you don't know where you are and you don't know the language. How are you going to get yourself out of that situation? And that does happen to people for real.
Yeah, that's
So,
crazy and extremely scary.
yeah.
How does the second book relate? Is it a follow-on from the first one, or something completely different, or similar sort of themes?
It's completely different, except it's suspense in genre. So once this one was out, I felt a bit more confident about taking a risk on writing a bit about what I know.
Sure.
So the background to this book lies behind the ruin. Is a family experience that we had when my children were small, and we were on holiday we were camping on holiday in France. We went into this small village, and there were lots and lots of very tiny houses for sale for next to nothing. So we thought, oh, we'll have a little look in the estate agents, and we found this ruined farm building, completely tumbled down, and we impulse bought it, thinking we could easily turn it into a holiday home.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, it wasn't easy.
Sure.
And our experience was really fraught with problems, but they were kind of hilarious. They were about the characters we met and the difficulties we had along the way. So I've taken that experience and I've given the same experience to a family from the UK who are having the most difficult problems in every area of their life in the UK, and they end up fleeing to France thinking they can start over. But because of the secrets and lies that are in the background of their life, they are not being honest with each other.
Right.
And so, as is my wont, it turns into a somewhat darker story and spirals a bit downwards. But there's a lot about France in there, and I've set it in the Limousin region around Limoges, which isn't the area where our house is, because I got some help from the bar owner in our village. I didn't want him coming along and saying, "Oh, you've written about me." Well, no, I haven't,
Sure.
because it's a made-up village near Limoges.
Yeah. I kind of want to hear a bit more about your house and what happened to your house, but perhaps that's another interview.
Yeah.
So, do you have a third book in the works at the moment, or ideas about possible?
Well, yes. So I had a bit of a setback because a lot of people who reviewed after leaving the village said, "Oh, we really want to know more, we want to know what happens next." So I thought of a plot for a sequel, and I started writing that. I spent a lot of time on it, was working on it, for a lot of last year. And then in about November, I realised it wasn't working. The characters wouldn't talk to me anymore. And I'd written about 40,000 words, which is a lot of work, because a book like these books are about 90,000 words roughly. So I'd written almost half. And I ended up having to abandon it. And then I found I had writer's block. So I spent several months just writing flash fiction and short form while I tried to think, what am I going to write? So then I returned to an old manuscript that I wrote while I was doing a master's in creative writing. Right. And I've torn that apart, kept some of the characters, changed the plot, and I'm working on that now.
Will it still be a follow-up to this, or is it?
Again, I think for me, standalone seems to be the answer.
Okay.
I know it's great for some writers to write series and sequels, but for me, I think probably taking a fresh view is more inventive.
Sure, and unless you do get a sudden strike of inspiration, and then I mean, I could maybe come back to the to the sequel, but I think you've got to be very close to your characters, and if the characters say that they're not going to talk to you anymore, like the characters were saying to me, "We've told you our story, we're not saying anymore," so I left it. Interesting. I suppose it's perhaps people that, again, perhaps early on in their writing career, or aspiring writers, maybe have a 2, 3, 4 book arc that they think they have. Would you say, from your experience of just what you've said, it's important to listen to yourself, that perhaps maybe you don't have 4 books in a particular series, and then you've done 1, and that's okay as well? You don't have to battle through it and maybe come up with something that you don't think is quite good enough, but just for the sake of it.
I mean, I think that would be advice that a lot of writers would be given. Like if you can get readers for a series and keep on churning out the series, then your readers will come with you. So it's harder for me, taking a different story every time.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I want to enjoy it.
Of course.
I spend a lot of time on my books and promoting them and I spend a lot of time with the characters. So
Yeah.
let's see if we can have new ideas and a new book roughly every year, every couple of years.
Sure. What do you do to prepare for a book? You've got an idea of the kind of foundations of what you think could be a very, very good story. Is there a certain process you go through to start writing? Do you go and find a sort of space to go back to? Is it finding time? What do you have a process, or do you just start doing it? And
yeah, I mean, in writing circles, there's a phrase: "Are you a plotter or a pantser?" And a pantser would be somebody who flies by the seat of their pants. I think because I've got like a long business background, I probably am quite a plotter. I'm quite a planner. So I'm probably about 80% plotter and 20% let it flow. So I would outline my book. I would probably even try to outline a lot of chapters. I'd certainly want to know what happened in the end. That doesn't mean to say that would be the end. I do change it as I go along.
Yeah.
Then I'd do some research, and then I'd start writing some sample chapters to see if it flows. Because one of the things you've got to do is you need to know if your book has got legs. It might be a good story, but it might not have 90,000 words in it.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't, then you're going to do an awful lot of work and waste it if the story doesn't sustain. So the one that I'm writing at the moment, I'm at first draft stage. I've got a very, very sloppy first draft, which I need to go back and go over many times. But I was in London last week, and one of my characters in the new book is going to live for part of the time on a canal in Little Venice. So while I was in London, I thought, right, I'll go up to Little Venice and I'll see if I can find somebody living on a canal houseboat who'll talk to me about their life.
Yeah,
and it was brilliant, actually. I took loads of photographs, and I found a guy who
wow.
lives on a boat and who had done it for 15 years and who wanted to talk to me about everything. So I had a really great experience. So now I'm very inspired, and that canal boat thing, which was only a tiny thing in the story, is probably going to feature a bit larger, because I want to communicate some of that interest.
Because you've got all that material on.
And it's just interesting, I think. Lots of things I didn't know about living on a canal.
No, I bet.
So,
isn't it funny how sometimes you do go looking for things and you just find them so easily?
Yeah.
Or even if perhaps you don't know that you're looking for them, but you find them and then it makes sense afterwards.
Exactly.
But again, from what you've said, both in your other books and this one, you seem to focus quite a lot on the research before starting. Is that because you're striving for believability and being authentic in what you're doing, would you say?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I guess my worst nightmare would be somebody coming along and saying I've made a mistake, like a real glaring mistake. And that is easily done if you don't check everything. And that's one of the reasons why I went to Albania. I mean, I had this book opens in Albania, and I had researched it very thoroughly. But at the last moment, really, because my book had already, I sort of had a deal, I decided I needed to go because I just had to check those facts out.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. Most of what I've done was fine, absolutely perfect. But there were one or two things that I was able to tweak, and then I was comfortable that I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I could talk about Albania forevermore.
Sure, and not just Googling.
Yeah, and this one, I've already mentioned that I spent some time interviewing a bar owner in my village because one of the characters does run a bar. But I also, although I don't write police procedurals, if you're writing and you've got an element of crime in your book, then at some point you're going to have some police activity. So I also spoke last summer to a gendarme who fact-checked the police procedure in Lies Behind the Room for me.
Wow.
And that, again, was fascinating, and I've acknowledged him, and all the others that have helped me are acknowledged in the acknowledgements.
Brilliant. And again, it's that eye for detail that probably does make a difference, doesn't it?
I hope so, yeah, because that's in the reviews, that's some of what people say they like. Particularly, I love it when a French person reads this book and says, that they found it really authentic, because then I feel like I've actually achieved what I set out to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than that, for someone who's watching this, perhaps who's struggling to become an author, or has got a first draft, or just an idea, knowing what you know now, if you could sort of start again, what would you definitely do and what would you not do?
Oh.
And there's probably lots.
That's a huge question,
Mm.
and I could spend ages answering it, but I'll try and do some summary
Sure,
things.
if you wouldn't mind.
Quick summary. I think obviously, if you're studying a craft, then you have to read a lot, and you should read, as well as everything else you should read in the genre that you're going to write.
Mm.
So for example, it's no point, I'm sure nobody would write fantasy if they weren't a fantasy reader. I don't read fantasy, so I'm not going to be writing it.
Sure.
And then find your tribe is very important, because writing can be very lonely. So writing groups, other places where you can network with authors, it could be online, it could be in the real world. That will give you that will sustain you through the hard times. And gradually through that network you'll find people to do book promoting with, and you'll make some really good friends, so I strongly recommend that.
It's almost the mirror image, or the other side of the coin of, we were briefly talking about before, about sort of marketing, online marketing, social media. You have to do that, don't you? If you're writing, that being in isolation and just writing by yourself might get you part of the way, but you can't just be
Absolutely.
Isolated, because everyone has bad days, everyone has like days when it just won't flow. And if you have a community of other writers, even if it's 3 or 4 people, you're all going through the same thing, aren't you?
Yeah.
And you can bounce ideas off each other, and
Yeah.
it is important, isn't it? You've
Totally.
got to network to succeed,
Yeah.
both in your writing and your promotion.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point there, because if we're talking about somebody who's just starting out, then really you should start getting your author platform set up straight away, by which we mean your social media. And use as many of them as you can, although maybe be more active on the ones that are more successful. So you need a
Sure.
Twitter, you may not need a website, but you could use like an author Facebook page, but then join the Facebook groups for writers, and you'll find loads of people there. And Instagram is good too. Bookstagrams are very popular, where hopefully other people take photos of your book and post it, but you can post your own if you want to. So do it now.
I think it's almost, again, today with technology and everything else, but perhaps if it was available 20 years ago, people would have used it then as well. It's the network, isn't it? When perhaps you had the publisher and you had, say, Waterstones or W.H. Smiths or something on the high street 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now you have to do everything you just said. You have to both say, coming soon, I'm working on this.
Yes.
Certainly if they know that you've got a previous book, they're like, oh, I read that book, I like that, and what are you reading on now? You have to, and I think a lot of people perhaps don't like doing that, do they? They don't kind of like putting themselves out there.
Yeah. I mean, that applies actually to middle ranking and top authors as well now.
Yeah,
so
very
if you're a
much.
top author, okay, there are some that just sell on their name alone, but say you're a newish author and you get like a really big book deal, then the publisher is going to expect you to be out there promoting, because they're going to want to sell lots and lots of books to get that back. And if you're middle ranking, then you're probably not going to get very much support from the publisher, because they won't have enough marketing budget to go around. So you'll have to do things yourself. And if you're small, like me, then you have to do absolute loads. But luckily I enjoy it, because I get to meet lovely people like Tom and the Bookpotato guys.
Thank you very much. What do you think isn't so great about the publishing industry and writing books these days? From your point of view, obviously, what are you frustrated with trying to sell books?
I think it's the fact that people don't always seem to value books. When you think about like an e-book, perhaps on Amazon or elsewhere, that is likely priced less than a cup of coffee. And yet people still seem to think, it's not worth it, or they expect you to give them books free. I'm talking perhaps about, potential reviewers. Okay, you probably would give a reviewer a book free, but then if they don't review it, you've given away the cup of coffee and got nothing back. So there's a lot where you do a lot and you perhaps get no reward for it, but that's life, that's marketing.
True. Do you think we're living in a good time for books, or better in terms of, because there's so many books coming out every week?
Yeah.
There's hundreds being
well,
published.
I mean, everybody's got an opportunity now. But what I would say is, if you're an aspiring author and you are thinking of self-publishing, which is absolutely fine, there's nothing at all wrong with that, make sure you get it professionally edited, professionally proofread, and get a decent cover. Don't put a book out there that's got mistakes in it. It'll damage your image potentially forever. But do put it out there once you've got it properly checked. No reason why not.
We, in the shop, we have conversation with people from either other shops or who used to work in shops, and the amount of times they say they've been handed a book by someone, so can you read this book for me? Or even people that are in writing groups, even people that are perhaps experienced and have published before, and so many glaring errors, spelling mistakes, typos, and they said, oh, has this been edited? And they've said, no, it's because, oh, I've edited it myself, or, oh, I didn't want an editor doing it because they would somehow, ruin my story or take the spirit of the story away. I think it's quite well, not necessarily common, but it's more common than perhaps people would think, that people believe they don't need an editor.
That's such a fallacy. Think of the most famous authors that you know, the most successful, and they would not dream of putting a book out without their editor. It's really, really false economy, and it will come back and bite you. You do have to be professionally edited.
Absolutely. For people who are interested in both these two books and your new project, what's the best way for people to contact you?
Well, you can contact me via my website, which is helenmathewswriter.com, with Helen Mathews Writer is all one word with 2 T's in Mathews. My book is here in Bookpotato, if you happen to be in the Leatherhead area. It has been in some branches of Waterstones. It's certainly probably still in Farnham. And any of those shops can get it for you. But do use an indie bookshop if you have an opportunity to do that. I really like to support them.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Helen, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. No problem.